Hey everyone, welcome to the Friday, January 16, 2026 episode of the On Iowa Politics podcast. It's a birthday episode. The On Iowa Politics podcast turns 13 today. And yes, we know that happy birthday podcast. And we do know that the podcast occasionally acts its age like a bratty, moody teenager. But we're glad you're with us and happy birthday to all of us nonetheless. And thank you for joining us to celebrate this very special occasion. This week, Governor Kim Reynolds gives her penultimate, not her last, condition of the state address. The Iowa Legislature's work has begun, and so much more. Hey everyone, I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. We got the full roster with us this week. Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton is here. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Erin.
Lee Des Moines Bureau Chief Maya Marchel Hoff is with us. Hello, Maya.
Good afternoon, Erin, and happy birthday, podcast.
Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times checking in. Hello, Sarah.
Greetings, Erin.
We have Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal with us. Hello, Jared.
Erin, Maya, Tom, only 96 days or so to go.
The countdown to Sine Die is already in full effect. Gazette columnist Althea Cole's with us. Hello, Althea.
Hello. Opinion columnists don't have to go to the Capitol, so I'm in the comfort of my home. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, I'm jealous. And finally, Gazette columnist Todd Dorman rounding out the lineup. Hello, Todd.
I'm rounding it out. Here I am.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at Todd's bio signature for those of you watching us on YouTube.
I can't see it anymore. I'm at the bottom of the page, so I believe I'm the King of Denmark.
Yeah, His Excellency, the King of Denmark.
At least
Dorman.
I'm the rightful King of Denmark. I have yet to be recognized.
For now, Your Majesty, for now.
Yeah, so this whole Trump thing, I'm going to lead an insurgency and retake the throne, I think is what I'm going to try to do. So big plans, big plans.
Right. That sounds like a good podcast topic, too, so we'll talk about that when that happens. All right. We got a lot to talk about at the Iowa Capitol this past week, but let's begin outside the Golden Dome. We're going to start on the campaign trail in Western Iowa with our favorite topic, campaign endorsements. Yay. Loyal listeners know how we on the podcast feel about endorsements, so you know it's a big one if we're going to devote a segment to one. So, Jared, what do you got for us?
Yeah, you picked the best person to talk about.
I know that's perfect.
With how much I love talking about endorsements in particular. So yeah, at the start of the week, Chris McGowan, the Siouxland Chamber of Commerce president, who's running for the 4th Congressional District House seat, he announced that he'd gotten the endorsement of former Governor Terry Branstad. Obviously, a big deal, just the fact to be getting an endorsement from Branstad, whether or not it matters, I'll get to in a second. Branstad kind of talked about McGowan a little bit in some stuff that the campaign sent out, saying he first met McGowan when McGowan was in high school and working on some stuff with 4-H. Branstad talked about McGowan being an America First conservative. He also touted some of McGowan's bona fides in working for the chamber over the years, and including McGowan and the chamber's work on the big PR crisis that BPI had with their finely textured beef, which Erin's shaking your head, and I'm sure Todd remembers that as well. Yep. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think the thing that I took note of with this particular endorsement is the fact that it came so early in the year, well before the primary, and seeing something like that, I couldn't help but think I would be surprised if we don't see at least one more person dropping out of this race before the primary actually happens, if not more than one, because it says a lot when, McGowan's gotten plenty of high-profile endorsements now from out of state. He got the House Majority Leader Steve Scalise. He got the Majority Whip Tom Emmer. He got the House Judiciary Chair Jim Jordan. And now to be getting somebody like the former governor, that's kind of hard to see if you're somebody else running in the race, looking to maybe get a little bit of juice from a name like that throwing behind you. So
what I'm hearing, Jared, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm hearing you say on the record on the On Iowa Politics podcast for all our listeners to hear is that you, Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal, think that this endorsement matters. Am I wrong?
You're not entirely wrong, no. Although I would still say, do I think this is going to move any votes at all? No. That's the thing I will always be steadfast on. You can knock me off my position a little bit when it comes to how it'll affect like the politics of a race, but not the actual turnout or anything like that. I will say something that is fascinating, and this is something I pressed McGowan and his campaign folks on back when he first got in the race, was he was saying that he saw himself as the outsider in this race, which kind of makes me smile at this point when you have the endorsements that he has and the fact that his campaign has said they now see him as the clear front runner in this race. Now, he would say, he's never run for any kind of office before whatsoever, and that's what makes him an outsider. But that's harder and harder to claim by the day, especially now that you have the former governor of the state of Iowa endorsing you.
The longest serving governor in U.S. history. It doesn't get much more establishment or insider than that. Jared, real quick before we move on, and full disclosure, I'm putting you on the spot here. I didn't give you a heads up. I want to ask this. So if you don't really have an answer, don't worry. And that's on me as a terrible host. I'm just curious if you're hearing much about this primary, or if you have a sense of it and how it's going. It feels like we talk about Chris McGowan more than anybody else. Is he running away with this thing? Is Matt Winchell still like? I'm just curious your thoughts on how this primary is unfolding over there in the fourth.
Well, I mean, there's been a couple of forums. I know there was one at Holstein, which unfortunately I was not able to make it to, so that of course didn't help get a even better sense of things. But no, I mean, that is a little bit of the feeling. I mean, McGowan, at least through the last round of fundraising reporting back at the end of September, was clearly out in front of everybody else when it came down to money. He didn't have nearly as big of a quarter this time, though. Along with that endorsement on Monday, he said that the campaign's now reached over $500,000 since he first got in the race. Well, back in September, they said they'd raised like 370-some thousand. So that's only like 125,000 or so since then. But that would probably still be ahead of everybody else if things continue from the last quarter. So, yeah, it does seem like for all intents and purposes for now, he's out in front of everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and obviously plenty of time for that. We're 6 months away from the primary, just a little bit less than, but I was just curious. Appreciate that, Jared. All right. We're going to move on now to a Capitol adjacent topic. Iowa State Legislator Ken Crokin, a Democrat from Davenport, is organizing an informational session on de-escalation after a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement officer shot and killed a Minnesota woman, as everybody knows from that news. And Crokin organizing the event in anticipation, he says, of potential future intensified immigration enforcement in the Quad Cities. Sarah, you reported on this. Tell us a little more about what Representative Crokin's doing here.
Yeah, so to put this in like a statewide context, there's been more protests against ICE, especially after the killing of Renee Good. Protests in the Capitol, in Ames, Des Moines, Iowa City, in Moline, Illinois, which is just right across the river. There's one in Davenport scheduled for Friday. So we're seeing some more protester organizing in response to the Minnesota actions. And so Ken Crokin, what he sees is he thinks it's only a matter of time before there's more intense ICE presence in the Quad Cities. We're a border community with Illinois, comprising about half of the cities in the Quad Cities. Davenport is a bluer city in the state. So he thinks that this, is only a matter of time And so he's bringing in a Chicago ward alderperson. Her name's Jessie Fuentes, and she made national news in October when she was handcuffed by ICE agents in a Chicago hospital after she asked for a warrant from agents who were attempting to arrest a hospitalized constituent. And so his goal with this is to provide a format for residents to come and learn about what their rights are, how to de-escalate situations if they're interacting with federal law enforcement. He said in his view that it'll be up to residents to de-escalate situations, because in his opinion, just based on what has come out of Minnesota, that federal agents may not be the de-escalating force in all situations. So he also introduced a couple bills that, being in the minority, probably aren't going to go anywhere. But one would ban the use of masks by law enforcement during routine duties, and another would forbid apprehension and detention of individuals in a courthouse, churches, and schools. And so that's a little bit about what Crokin's after, and just generally statewide some responses to ICE's presence in Minneapolis. One statistic reading about this that I was really struck by was that with these additional deployments that Trump has announced, or Kristi Noem, has announced, 3,000 agents are expected to be in Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and that's more than several, like most of the departments combined. There's only about 600 officers on the Minneapolis Police Department, so that's a really big law enforcement presence.
No, and this session is coming up. It's being scheduled. It's being put together, right, Sarah? It hasn't happened yet. Am I right about that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I should probably say what day.
No, that's okay.
That's January 24th.
Okay.
Sarah, I'm curious. I can't remember if I've talked about this before or not on the podcast, but we in the past year have had to deal plenty of times with people saying that they had heard that like ICE is in Sioux City, and then we've had to run that down, a few different times now. Have you guys had that pop up in the past year or so too, in your guys' newsroom, and trying to run down stuff like that?
Yeah, mostly they're pretty just, we've had especially in the Muscatine, West Liberty area, people who, have gone to appointments and then been arrested at those appointments, or, there were a couple incidents where people were arrested for other crimes and deported. But nothing that's like, there's a raid on an employer or something like that. We haven't had cases of that.
Yeah, those are the ones that we primarily get because of the packing plants and everything like that. And I know just yesterday, speaking of another one of our sister papers, the Globe Gazette was trying to run down some people speculating that ICE was in Mason City, and it seems like they did confirm that there were some ICE agents that checked in with Cerro Gordo County Sheriff's Office yesterday, and it wasn't clear whether or not they were still hanging around there today or not. So it's popping up in a few different places in Iowa.
Yeah. All right. I was going to say, Sarah, we'll maybe hear about that after the session. Is that going to be an open public thing? Is that something?
I believe that's open to the public.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's head back up to the Golden Dome now, where the 2026 session of the Iowa Legislature began this week. The session started Monday. On Tuesday, Governor Kim Reynolds gave the annual Condition of the State address. And just for clarification's sake, as I mentioned off the top, no, it was not Reynolds' final Condition of the State. She will also give it next year during her final days in office. In Iowa, the incumbent governor gives the address even when a new governor is on the way in. The last real example we had of that, you have to go back to 2011, when Governor Chet Culver gave the address in January of 2011, just after having lost his re-election bid in the 2010 election. Obviously, the Branstad to Reynolds transition kind of happened I believe that was May, so this didn't really apply there. As for Reynolds' remarks this past week, she unveiled her plan for property taxes, talked about her plan to use federal funding for cancer treatment and prevention, strengthening state immigration policies, and expanding public charter school access, among other topics. Todd, what stood out to you from Reynolds' penultimate condition of the state address? Todd's a big fan of that word.
Well, I was just caught in memories of Chet Culver's amazing speech he gave after he was soundly beaten in the 2010 election.
I'd be really curious to hear. Do you remember that speech?
Yeah, I think he just mooned the legislature at the end of it and flew two birds. I can't be sure, but I think it was something along those lines.
Are we talking about Chet Culver or Bobby Kaufman?
Yeah, well, Chet Culver made it cool to flip everyone off in the Capitol. Yeah, I kind of expected him to just kind of sit down and cross his legs and crack open a beer and just say, well, you don't have me to kick around anymore. So anyway, did anything jump? What did you say? Stood out?
Yeah, stood out, jump out, surprise you, anything along those lines?
No, it was as advertised. You knew she was going to have something to say about property taxes. It's not surprising that she talked about cancer and she talked about charter schools and all of those different things. She spent a long time, which was fitting, on memorializing the soldiers who were killed and wounded in, I believe, Syria. Did I get Syria? Yeah, right. So, yeah, in that way, it was fairly, predictable. Her property tax plan, one advantage it might have over the one in the Senate is that it's a heck of a lot less complicated. I mean, you're going to slap that 2% revenue cap on and, do the 50% tax exemption and freeze the property taxes for grandma. And, that's going to be the gist of it. It's surprising. I have not seen any local government say really much of anything yet. I assume that that's not going to be good for them. I think everybody's just maybe waiting for a more, something that's actually moving, or it seems like it's going to be the plan before they start weighing in. They don't want to,
at least publicly. Yeah,
they don't want to leave the locker room. I haven't been able to. I've been trying to get people to call me back. Tell them that talk to me off the record. I just want to know if this is going to be as bad as, it seems like it could be, and for local government, and nobody's taken me up on it yet. So I think everybody's just kind of remaining silent and saving the, not giving away the game in the locker room.
Yeah, keeping their heads down until the real bullets start flying. Like we're still waiting for House Republicans' bill too. So
yeah, which is going to have a cap. Also, yeah. I'm sure. I think the Senate bill is what is it a variable cap, something to do with inflation, or is it just a straight 3%? Or I can't remember what they said. It's all these plans are very.
Yeah, it's all jumbled in my brain right now, to be perfectly honest, and I couldn't give you a straight answer without a protractor in about a half an hour.
Well, and the one way they're making it easier is they're just basically going to maybe cap local government revenue growth.
Right.
And
that does seem to be, yeah.
Well, in the past, when, property tax reform came out, there was this feeling, hey, we've got to have a big pile of money so that we can backfill the lost revenue to local governments. But there's no talk about anything like that now. It's just, they're just going to cap it and say, hey, money doesn't grow on trees. Remember when we were kids? And I do not remember my parents telling me that what money doesn't grow on trees. So that's why I'm so financially inept, I guess. But yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what the House says, what happens. I guess they can get it done in the session. That's what their goal is. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously going to be the fascinating thing once all the plans are on the table, how they come to an agreement, given how there are some similarities, but there's some pretty stark differences too so far. So a lot of work there to get a final bill that all three legs of the tripod will sign off on. Althea, how about you? What stood out to you from Governor Kim Reynolds' address Tuesday night?
In the very glamorous life of an opinion columnist, I actually caught most of Governor Reynolds' speech through my earbuds as I was in my hotel room. I went up to Rochester, Minnesota, where I spent a few days this week, eating at a restaurant called the Canadian Honker, which was actually pretty good. But yeah, so I caught most of that through the earbuds and on my smartphone. One thing that did stand out to me was how Governor Reynolds spoke about expanding charter school access. Now, mind you, Iowa did pass a bill now almost 5 years ago, about expanding public charter school access, making sure that that it wasn't so difficult to start one up. And since then, a number have started up. And she gave special mention in her condition of the state speech to Cedar Rapids Prep, which is a tuition-free public charter school that opened at the beginning of this particular school year. And as she pointed out, it opened its doors for middle school students and quickly filled every seat with a waiting list already forming. And the school is already looking to expand to meet the demand for its enrollment. Governor Reynolds, she's really been leading not only in the state, but nationwide in terms of school choice. And under Kim Reynolds, the education market in Iowa is just that. It's become more of a free market thing. With some pretty strong results. Compare that to what Democrats are proposing, because they've been in the minority for a number of years now. Democrats' greatest hits on education lately have basically been saying no. In 2021, they said no to Republicans' bill that said, the remaining school districts in the state of Iowa where that can stop somebody from transferring out into a different public school district on what was called a voluntary diversity plan. It used to be that some school districts could stop students from enrolling out into another public school district. Republicans passed a bill to do away with that so that anybody in any public school district could transfer based on availability and not based on any other factors such as income diversity. And Democrats said no to that. That same year in 2021, the Republicans passed a bill to expand charter school access, making it easier to open a charter school. Democrats said no to that. And then, of course, in 2023 was the big one, the Students First Act, which made education savings accounts, or ESAs, which are often called vouchers, which made those available beginning with an income threshold. And now this is the first year that ESAs are universally available regardless of income. So Democrats typically in their attacks on school choice, school choice being kind of the overarching term for a system in which dollars follow the student regardless of whether or not it's to a private school or to a school district or to a charter school. Their big attack in that has been that public dollars should not be going to private schools. Now, with charter schools, that attack is a little bit more difficult because charter schools, even though they are not school districts based on any particular geographical boundary lines, they are still public schools insofar as that the money goes directly from the state to the school itself. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out as far as whether or not charter schools are something that Democrats support, continuing with that, because their attacks, for the most part, have stopped short at just ESAs and private schools. And yet charter schools right now in some areas, particularly in Cedar Rapids, charter schools are drawing away more students than private schools. Open enrollment is still the key driver of when somebody who remains in the area leaves the school district. But it's very interesting that Reynolds wants to focus on charter schools because, again, you've got that public element that still is involved in a charter school. So one of the things she wants to do this year, she talked about in her speech, is that she wants to make charter school access a little bit better insofar as the fact that she wants to make sure that concurrent enrollment is possible. Concurrent enrollment is basically when a school district or a private school can have a contract with a local community college. Right now, state code, it appears, is written so that it doesn't specify charter schools or anything like that. It just specifies private schools and then school districts. So there's still things to be done there. But again, all this is indicative of the fact that under Kim Reynolds, education has turned into more of a free market. And a lot of parents and a lot of students are really following that lead and looking at their options and saying, we like what we see, we're ready to make a change, and now it's possible.
All right. Appreciate that, Althea. in addition to the normal pomp and circumstance of the first week of the session with all the leadership speeches, the various conditions of addresses, in addition to the Reynolds, we have the condition of the judiciary address from the Supreme Court Chief Justice and the condition of the Guard address from the National Guard leader, Adjutant General. It also, to me, felt like some legislators were a little eager to get the legislative ball rolling a little faster than usual this week. There was subcommittee and committee work that was a little more active, I felt like, anyways, than your typical week one. Not that there was a ton of it, but usually there's next to none, and we actually had a not zero amount of legislative action this week. Maya, whether it's from one of those conditions of addresses or anything else from that, some of that legislative action, what we're 1 week down here. What stood out to you during week one of the 2026 session?
Yeah, I'm gonna something that stood out to me happened exactly 2 hours before the condition of the state address on Tuesday, which was a subcommittee hearing for a bill that would prohibit eminent domain for carbon capture pipelines. This is not a surprise that it came up in the House or that it's coming up again this legislative session. Obviously, we saw it become a very key and contentious debate last year, more so than it's ever been, because it made it to the floor of the Senate. And even though the legislation that lawmakers put forward around that issue was vetoed by Reynolds, we knew it was going to come back because there is enough sway from lawmakers in both chambers that we knew they were going to continue to push. But that popped up 2 hours before the condition of the state address. And this is going to be my second legislative session, but in talking to more veteran reporters, it seems like that is a pretty rare occurrence for a subcommittee on a bill to happen 2 hours before that. So that was just really interesting to see. Obviously, I don't know if that's signaling just lawmakers wanted to establish that this is something that they will be pushing right out of the gates this session, along with property tax. But unsurprisingly, the bill advanced out of subcommittee. It was heard in committee yesterday, and it was advanced too. It'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, we kind of know that the House is a little bit more, they've passed multiple bills around eminent domain in the past few years. And so there's movement on that, and it'll be really interesting to see what's going to happen on the Senate side. Senate Majority Leader Mike Clemish says he plans to introduce a proposal early in the session that would allow pipeline projects to amend their planned and approved routes in order to enter into voluntary easements with landowners and avoid using eminent domain. And then obviously something that wasn't said at all during the condition of the state by Governor Reynolds was anything about eminent domain. And we asked legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle just about that and what that means for this issue gaining traction moving forward in the legislation, and kind of got, from Republican leaders, House Speaker Pat Grassley and Clemish, we're focused on this issue. This is where it is in our chambers. We'll see where it moves, and we'll see what it kind of comes to, which is kind of expected of them to say, especially this early on. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this forms. Landowners, if you're at the Capitol at all during the legislative session and you see the red shirts, they're there a lot. On Tuesday, ahead of the subcommittee meeting too, they held a group prayer in the third floor rotunda right outside of the doors to either chamber, and then they would go to, before they went to lobby their lawmakers. They're in full force. They obviously packed the subcommittee room on Tuesday. So yeah, this issue is definitely going to be prominent again this session. And just to kind of cap that off, Erin, you asked a really interesting question that I've been thinking about after you answered it, when we had a gaggle with Speaker Grassley earlier today, and you asked, with difficult issues like this where there is some traction, but you might need a final push, like hands-free driving legislation last year, where Governor Reynolds put that in her condition of the state address. And you mentioned that her using that bully pulpit to kind of be able to push that across the finish line. Do you think that her omission of anything related to eminent domain, or, do you think that would actually help this issue more move forward? And, he was kind of like, well, kind of give similar answer. Like, this is what we're focused on. We're focused on a narrowly tailored legislation around eminent domain. But I just thought that was a really interesting point that you made. And
Yeah. And you're right. He Speaker Grassley kind of opted against answering that one directly. Real quick before we go to Tom, real quick, Todd or Althea, were you either of you surprised or think it was a misstep, or maybe it's not a big deal? Whatever, open question. Whatever you think. I don't mean to be leading. That the governor didn't even mention eminent domain or property rights at all during condition of the state.
At this point, I would not call it a major misstep. It's no secret that there's still battles within the Republican caucus in terms of if they pass any legislation and what legislation would be passed. And that eminent domain fight has extended to the Republican gubernatorial primary. So yeah, there is such a thing as taking a side in ways that do not benefit the caucus or the passage of any particular bill whatsoever. So yeah,
that's a good point.
I don't think it was a terrible misstep. I think there would have been actually a lot of implications. We would have picked apart Reynolds' words, word for word, had she mentioned anything. So if she wants to avoid that controversy, the nice thing is, I don't mind bills being, introduced as quickly as they have been this particular session. Keep in mind, last session, the session adjourned in mid-May, which was, it's not the latest a legislative session has ever gone in Iowa history or even recent history. But, anytime you still go past session, there adds this kind of special funk to it as far as, are we going to get anything done? What are we going to get done? And oh my God, we have to get this done. But, at the end of last session, it basically came down to a pretty nasty intra-party fight, because you had a group of senators saying, we're not going to agree to pass any budget legislation until we can get an eminent domain bill on the floor. And, they technically got what they wanted, and then it was vetoed by Reynolds. So there they are back at square one. And if they're going to start that off with a bang this year, fine. But should that have gone into Reynolds' speech? It was definitely better that it didn't.
That's a good
this far in, though, to this issue and this being in the legislature, wouldn't taking a side be clarifying at this point so that there isn't all this energy expended one way or the other? And like, if you just stay silent on it forever and then only weigh in if another bill passes by, vetoing it, let's say that's how it goes, you're just going to piss everybody off again. And I don't really know what that would accomplish.
Well,
people are going to be mad in this. People are going to be mad in this fight, regardless of what she says or if she says something.
Well, I know, but I just wonder. Like, I think it seems like it would be clarifying, though. People might still be mad, but you would think that weighing in would at least alleviate some of it.
At least eliminate some unknowns.
She doesn't say anything because she never says anything, and she's not going to sign a bill that does anything meaningful. I mean, why would she sign a bill now when she's off heading out the door to the private sector where, I've heard that these agricultural ventures pay fairly well and have some nice jobs, perks. So nothing has changed. She's quiet, and they're passing a bill, and it's a bill that she's not going to sign.
Yeah.
Unless they water it down into something that doesn't really do much of anything.
Well, and to a little bit maybe to that point, Todd, something I took note of from your story was you had a line talking about the summit lobbyist was expressing support for Klimish's proposal. And I took note of that because I would have to think for a lot of the landowners that are really, really gung-ho about this issue, seeing Summit supporting any part of any kind of proposal is not going to make them very happy and would not help them in stomaching any legislation.
Well, and the other thing is, are we having a political battle over the dead body of a pipeline project? I mean, this thing is not moving. It's facing all sorts of opposition everywhere, basically.
Especially in South Dakota.
Yeah, right. South Dakota has stopped it cold. So
because they passed the bill that the Iowa House Republicans now want to pass.
Unless they're going to go, somewhere around Cedar or somewhere around Sioux City, Jared, and start burying carbon. Maybe that's what they're going to do. Could be a tourist attraction. They could do it on Trinity Heights. You say, come see Trinity Heights and the giant hole of carbon.
All right. Tom, apologize. We got sidetracked there. Come back to you now. Like Maya and I, our week one is in the books. What stood out to you most this week?
Yeah, what jumped out to me this week was there's a real sense of urgency and maybe impatience, especially among Republicans, to show that they're moving on these big thorny issues that they've been talking about for years. And in a couple of cases, that urgency also exposed just how far apart they are internally. So again, we've talked about property taxes. That's probably maybe the clearest example. As we mentioned, Governor Reynolds used her condition of the state to roll out a property tax reform proposal that, according to her office, would save taxpayers more than $3 billion over 6 years. Again, capping revenue growth for local governments, slowing down assessment cycles, freezing taxes for seniors, tightening up TIF or tax increment financing, and even changing how county officials are selected. But almost as soon as she finished, you could kind of hear the seams showing. So Senate Majority Leader Mike Klimisch made it clear that the Senate is thinking about something more aggressive, basically tearing down the system to the chassis, as he told reporters. House Speaker Pat Grassley said the House is working on its own bill with overlapping goals, but different pieces. So you've got 3 Republican-controlled power centers all saying property tax relief is urgent and all signaling different routes to get there. So that disconnect stood out to me because, again, property taxes are supposed to be the unifying Republican issue this year. Instead, this first week made it obvious that agreeing on the diagnosis hasn't necessarily translated into agreement on the cure. And Democrats are already kind of sharpening that point, basically saying, you've run the state for nearly a decade, show us results, not just plans. Again, the other big thing that struck me was, again, how fast House Republicans moved on carbon pipelines and eminent domain, as we talked about, holding a subcommittee just hours before the governor's speech. Again, that felt very intentional. It kind of seemed that was the first real legislative punch of the session and aimed squarely at an issue that has split Republicans for years. What's different now maybe is the framing around that. Supporters like Representative Steve Holt are treating this as a straight constitutional question about property rights and not a regulatory tweak, as we saw with that Senate bill that passed, the bill that passed the Senate last session that ultimately the governor vetoed. Meanwhile, ethanol groups and pipeline companies are warning that this could shut Iowa out of low carbon fuel markets while neighboring states move ahead. And again, as I mentioned, hanging over all of this is the governor's veto from last year of a more limited pipeline bill. So again, passing something early sets up a kind of a direct confrontation, within the Republican Party and within the legislature. And then there's higher education, which maybe didn't get as much public attention this week, but House Republicans are moving a bill that would kind of lock down university president searches even more, keeping finalist names secret, and seemingly cutting faculty, students, and others from meaningful roles. What stood out to me about that specific proposal is kind of the juxtaposition that we saw with Republican attacks and criticisms of how the Des Moines superintendent was chosen. So former Des Moines Superintendent Ian Roberts, who was arrested this past fall, by immigration officials. And, there was a lot of criticism heaved on the Des Moines School Board by Republicans over, the vetting process used after, numerous stories came out about Ian Roberts' background and how, he didn't have kind of the professional credentials that he claimed to have, didn't have the degrees that he had listed on his resume. Ultimately, according to, federal officials and prosecutors, didn't have the citizenship status that he claimed to have. So, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here. Of course, I didn't pay close attention to his hiring process, at the time with the Des Moines district, but I believe that was also kind of a closed process. I don't know if they announced names of finalists ahead of time, but it seems like if you're wanting to prevent issues like this from happening again in the future, it seems the solution here is, more transparency, opening up the process, releasing the names of finalists to give people time to look into their backgrounds and to dig and to raise, these red flags, earlier in the process, certainly before they're hired.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's good, and it'll be interesting to see if I presume that'll come up in debate over that legislation. All right, that's gonna do it. Another jam-packed news week. Thanks for sticking with us. But that will be it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice. We're in YouTube, where you can also smash the like button to grow our audience. You can also find the podcast each and every week on your preferred Gazette or Lead newspaper website, where we get the clicks, which is also nice. Go to both places. That's even better if you really want to help us out. Now that you listen to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox, you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And I get paid a commission on that free newsletter too, so sign up for those. Lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs State and Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For Tom Barton, Maya Marchel, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Althea Cole, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey Sheehan, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.